Assalamu alaikum, peace and blessings to all of my family from Tigray and to all of those who have put this extraordinary effort together. I must say in the outset that throughout the day I've been tuning in, and each time I do, I really almost have to shut it off because my heart is heavy, and I can only imagine how heavy the heart is for those with actual family that are in Tigray, and with those who have been listening to the reports, who have been processing the news. But I just must begin by commending the phenomenal courage, the extraordinary, unwavering resilience and strength of young sisters and brothers and from the Tagaro kind of diaspora in the United States, across Europe, without which, quite frankly, I would never have known of the details of this phenomenal history, of this extraordinarily beautiful people, and of this horrific set of circumstances. And it's because I have been made aware, because of the unwavering strength, and many of you who are either watching or organizing this 24 hours for Tigray have been able to keep each other inspired in spite of all of the extraordinary and the horrific news that is coming out of Tigray. You've been able to create spaces for people like me and educate me and to connect me to this issue. And so I want to begin by thanking all of you and to continue to encourage you, even in dark times, this spiritual notion. And we are in a spiritual moment. We are in a sacred moment in many calendars. I know, in some of the Christian, in the Orthodox Tagaro tradition, there's a moment of fasting. I think you've either started or about to start. Saum, the same word in Arabic, I think very related to the word in Tigrinya, kind of this idea that we are about to embark on a very spiritual path, and God willing that there's an opportunity for spiritual healing, even in the most challenging and difficult times. Our faith carries us through in these types of moments. And as you were saying, my sister, so powerfully and so beautifully, so many of one of the most extraordinary things that I've come to really, really value and love is that irrespective of what faith tradition you identify with, there's an unmistakable spiritual richness of the people of Tigray. It's part of your history, it's part of your legacy, and I am confident that even in this dark and tumultuous and very painful moment, that it will continue to carry you through. It will allow your voices to ascend. And so that's why I'm here. And I'm here because, first of all, I'm, as a humanitarian, the horror that is coming out of a region that, I was clueless about, quite frankly, up until a month ago. Even someone with the privilege of a PhD education from some of the best institutions in the country, right? University of Chicago, and here as an activist and organizer, and a person who has I think held up Ethiopia as a narrative, right? Of kind of the historical defeat of colonialism in Africa, as a site that, those of us who've tapped into Bob Marley and Rasta culture and have romanticized a certain sector of Haile Selassie's and what he meant in certain kind of cultural conditions. I feel honestly that I was complicit in contributing to a narrative that erased the people of Tigray, that has subjected the people of Tigray to not just this genocidal confrontation, but decades, if not even longer, of being oppressed, of being violently subjugated in ways being where famine and food has been used as a war, a tool of war. And so part of why I'm here is hearing what any humanitarian would hear is happening to women, men, elderly, children in this moment should be gut-wrenching for any human being that is attuned to this, to their consciousness, who has not fallen victim to silencing narrative that has enough wit about them. You don't need to know the political nuances of history. You just have to be really in tune with how dominant forces across the globe with narratives, with power, try to silence those who are being oppressed, who turn around and turn those who are often the subjects of terror into the terror makers, right? I, as a Palestinian, have a deep familiarity with that narrative. My grandfather was a refugee who settled on the south side of Chicago. My family still lives in Jerusalem under military occupation. I encounter that reality anytime I go home to visit family, or unfortunately sometimes confronted here. I certainly know of extraordinary, beautiful Jewish people and communities across the globe that don't identify with all of that. But certainly I know the silence kills me. I know the pain hurts. I know the erasure of Palestinian identity and national narrative. I know what that feels like. I know what it feels like to be both visible but invisible. And in some ways, Ethiopia has been very visible as a narrative we've celebrated, but the people of Tigray have been invisible. Their suffering has been invisible. We remember the moments of We Are the World. We remember the war moments of famine, but we've not taken the time and deliberation that is necessary to understand people's narratives. Why is that suffering happening? What are the political circumstances that induce that suffering? And why do they continue to reemerge in a place like Tigray? And why haven't we been more vocal? I think that's a really important question for those of us across the globe who are in this moment. It's certainly important for me as a humanitarian, as a Palestinian, as a Muslim who takes faith commitment seriously, who's been inspired to connect to faith traditions through organizers and activists. And I think who's been inspired to be in interfaith spaces, that not because they're just, nice spaces to be in, but that gives me energy. It gives me energy to be in a church filled with people who are genuinely and authentically committed to the connecting to the Most High. It gives me energy. It's healing for me to be among, of students of rabbinical kind of traditions of justice that take that seriously. It gives me energy to be in the presence of, Lakota elders on Pine Ridge Reservation. It gives me energy to be among people who take faith commitments seriously, who take spiritual reality seriously. And, and because of that, it pains me that a place in the world that is so rich with this spiritual tradition, that in many ways, when we are in so desperate need of narratives and spaces and places that lift up authentic models, that Jewish and Muslim and Christian communities have come together, Tigray is that place. Tigray has been that place, as you were mentioning, from the ancient stories of Bilqis, as we call her in Arabic, Sheba, and Suleiman, Solomon, and the early history of Christian traditions that predate kind of the colonialized version of Christianity that is imposed, that most Black churches in America have spent many years, like James Cone, trying to disentangle themselves from. It's why great friends like Pastor Otis Moss from one of the most dynamic Black churches on the South Side have made trips to Ethiopia part of their ministry to try to encounter an expression of Christianity that predates the expression, the entanglement of Christianity into the white supremacist project that killed and slaughtered Black bodies in the United States, that was part of the narrative of enslaving those bodies as they were transported across, the horrific transatlantic slave trade. And, so, Tigray is that region within Ethiopia in which that narrative should be celebrated, that should be preserved. It's for Muslims across the globe. We have to ask ourselves a very, very difficult question. Why are our voices not louder? If we take the stories of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, if we take the stories of the Sahaba and the early Muslims seriously, and we understand that as Jafar ibn Abi Talib, the cousin of the Prophet Muhammad, sought refuge in Ethiopia, it was the first place in Tigray that they were received, to not only for political asylum, but to be nurtured and supported, not only by the king, Najashi, but by the people of that land, by the ancestors of the people who are being slaughtered, that are being, and I don't want to use triggering language because you've heard that all day, and it's not my place to do so, but unspeakable atrocities that are happening to our sisters, to our women, to our children in Tigray. Why aren't we louder? Why aren't we louder if we respect that history? We are on the eve of a very, sacred moment in the Muslim calendar, where we're going to be thinking about the night journey that the Prophet, peace be upon him, made to Jerusalem, and made in the Isra wa Miraj, and this encounter with the divine. But why if we preserve and celebrate those moments, why aren't we celebrating and preserving and lifting up the moments in which, if without which there may not be a story of Islam to celebrate, there may not be the legacy of Islam without the people of Tigray, without the ancestors in Tigray. So my question to those who are Muslim in the Muslim community, that take your stories, that take your narratives, that take your traditions seriously, why aren't we louder? Why aren't we more forceful about standing with this community in this moment? It pains me. It really brings great pain to me that we are complicit in some ways, that our silence is deafening. And so I am really calling upon all communities, but certainly the larger Muslim communities. And unfortunately, it's not surprising that there are nations, as we know, of the nation states that identify as Muslim-led or Arabs, that are also physically, that are complicit in very real ways. Why aren't we demanding that the embassy from the Emirates be publicly more accountable for the fact that drones have been used in this attack on women and men and children and innocents in this region? So I come to you all today publicly in this moment, first and foremost as a brother, as a person that sees myself in all these ways connected to the people of Tigray, and because I've had the extraordinary privilege and honor of getting to know to some of the Tagaro people throughout this last month, and being educated and being very patiently connected and we had the honor of being at one of the protests not long ago in DC, where I had a chance to physically interact and encounter the community. And I'm here to publicly commit myself to this struggle, to the people, to the community, and to continue to pray for this community, to continue to say that the demands that I think are part of the 24-hour Tigray, for Tigray, those three calls to action that we should all commit ourselves to get full humanitarian relief, to call for a immediate negotiated truce, but also call for all foreign governments and other governmental, to lifting up the media blockout, to lifting up all kind of entanglements with other foreign troops. We should all be making those demands, and we should all be calling beyond that to our communities to become more educated about Tigray, to begin to see our ancient spiritual tradition. As an organizer on the south side of Chicago, I'm often agitating, Arab and Palestinian communities who've had their own pain and suffering about, the inattention that we have given over the years to the struggle of Black folks in America, the struggle of folks that, in many ways, communities that without the Black American struggle, many of our immigrant communities wouldn't be here in the first place. And in some cases, some of our immigrant communities settled in Black majority neighborhoods And rather than working as a force of liberation and mercy, we contributed to some of the exploitation of the community. I believe we have a duty to call out our communities and to lift and work. And that's why my work with Iman is so unapologetically committed to that. And I'm proud of the Palestinians that we've worked with and on the South Side that are standing up in those very real ways. And I call our community to continue to be mindful of the fact that it was anti-Black racism, quite frankly, that erased the suffering of Black folks from our consciousness. And it took movements like BLM, it took the public suffering that we have to see, the painful suffering, to awaken a national consciousness and to awaken even some of the immigrant communities that were, complicit in some of the ways in which they talk about Black folks, that we subscribe to some of the very same narratives, that we left Black neighborhoods to be proximate to people that, were often connected to narratives that said even proximity to Blackness was a problem in America. But it's those same narratives that have erased in many conversations on a national level the importance of Africa as a continent, the importance of suffering in Africa, and the importance of places like Tigray. And so we have to get beyond the romantic, kind of just romantic connections to stories that are important, and remember that, in fact, those stories that we lift up about nations like in Ethiopia, including the more modern stories of people who stood up to colonial powers, that those too, again, these were in many ways the Tagaro people who were fighting Italian colonialism and fighting Italian fascism as they came under Mussolini. And it's this people and this land and this connection that is part of the Ethiopian narrative that we must stand up for. And so finally, I'll close with this because I know time is short as we close out. Again, to especially my sisters and brothers, my Tagaro sisters and brothers, both in Tigray especially, but also across the world that are, painfully trying to monitor the situation. Again, I pray for you. I'm here to be in conversation with those who can be in conversation, and also to just say to take solace in the spiritual moment. I think we believe in the power of spiritual moments, that we are in such a moment right now, and that Muslims in this particular moment, as they get ready for the month of Ramadan, are remembering the year of what was the most painful year in the life of the Prophet Muhammad. It was called Sanat al-Huzn, the year of sadness. His people were starving in Mecca. They were oppressed in great numbers. He had experienced the loss of his great protector and his wife Khadija, and was going through just tremendous turmoil and trauma. And then he has this miraculous journey in Jerusalem where he encounters all these prophetic traditions. It's called the Isra wal-Miraj, the night journey. And from that moment, this kind of Medina then opens up as an opening. And it's kind of a spiritual metaphor, I think, for so many of the prophetic traditions, that sometimes in the darkest moments, can come great spiritual openings. And so my prayer is that in this dark, dark moment, that there is a great liberating spiritual moment for the people of Tigray and for the Tagaro people across the world, that will provide a new way of being in the world, a new way of connecting in the world. And I've already seen that moment emerge in your courageous voices on forums like this one. And I am forever indebted to being able to have had the honor of meeting you and to being here with you tonight. And you can continue to count on me to be a voice alongside your voices, to be a person that alongside all of you will continue to advocate, to push, and to lift my voice with yours for our people all over the world.